Who could have imagined that the poorest country in Asia, one just emerging from war like Afghanistan, would be behind a project that could change all of Central Asia? That's right, a mega project. But not from the United States, China, or the Arab world, but Afghanistan. Over 10,000 workers and 3,000 massive machines are working day and night, digging away at a 177-mile-long green corridor that could bring a new future to Afghanistan. But at the same time, it's making 4 other countries anxious about an unprecedented crisis. Can you guess what this project is? Stick around until the end to find out. More than half a century of continuous war has left Afghanistan devastated cities, destroyed roads and bridges, collapsed unstable electricity and water networks everywhere. According to the World Bank and humanitarian organizations, about 70% of the population lives below the poverty line, and the official unemployment rate hovers around 14%. But if that wasn't enough, Afghanistan has also been hit by severe droughts. In 2021, the snowmelt and precious water sources that sustain the north dropped to record lows. Fields cracked, crops failed, and hunger spread. People exhausted and impoverished began migrating en masse. Without water, all reconstruction efforts are just an illusion. To revive the economy and bring people back to their farms, Afghanistan first has to bring in new water sources. With no other options, the government was forced to think big. A plan from the 20th century once forgotten to channel water from the Amu Darya River, originally proposed by King Mohammed Khan, has now become their hope. Even without international aid, Afghanistan decided to launch the project to save the north and the entire country. To realize this ambition, Afghanistan had only one choice: the Amu Darya, the lifeline of Central Asia. Starting from the icy mountains of Tajikistan, the river stretches nearly 1,500 miles, with a basin covering about 206,000 square miles, supplying around 25 trillion gallons of water each year to 4 countries: Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. The Amu Darya is like the last lifeline for the north. Afghanistan decided to create a new branch of the river. The project is called the Qosh Tepa Canal, a massive irrigation canal roughly 177 miles long, 330 to 490 feet wide, and 28 feet deep. It starts at the Kaldar intake and cuts across the provinces of Balkh Jawzian and Faryab. While many thought the idea of digging an artificial river in Afghanistan was just a fantasy, in March 2022, the Qosh Tepa Canal Project officially launched. Its width is greater than an American football field, and its depth could swallow a 3-story building. The designed flow is 23,000 cubic feet per second, about twice the flow of the Potomac River, through Washington, D.C. At maximum capacity, it can move up to 14.8 billion gallons of water every day. To manage such a massive volume, Afghanistan didn't dig the canal in a straight line, but divided the whole route into 114 segments. Each segment is dug reinforced, inspected, and test-filled with water in sequence to ensure continuous flow and reduce the risk of landslides. In Phase 1, from the Amu Darya intake to the center of Balkh province, about 67 miles, were completed in just 18 months instead of 24. Along the route, 14 hydraulic gates rise like fortresses, ready to control floods during the rainy season and stabilize water levels. In Phase 2, the canal continues from Balkh toward Jawzian and Faryab. By the end of 2024, 81% of this phase's excavation was done, bringing the total project to 61% complete, with about 110 miles of canal finished in less than 3 years. Over 10,000 workers and 3,300 pieces of heavy equipment, from giant excavators to laser surveying rigs, operate 24/7, moving about 35 million cubic feet of earth each day, equal to over 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This method divides the entire canal into 114 segments, each dug reinforced and test-filled in sequence to ensure stable flow and minimize landslides. The final phase is the most intricate, expected to finish by the end of 2025. Workers are installing underground irrigation pipes, pump stations, and concrete bridges to connect villages on both sides of the canal, as well as integrating pipelines for drinking water. By the time you're watching this documentary, nearly 2/3 of the entire project is done. Many sections of the canal have already welcomed their first flows, bringing life to tens of thousands of people along the route. Do you know what the biggest crisis is for a country in turmoil like Afghanistan? That's right, it's the budget. Surprisingly, not a single foreign country is investing. All the funding is domestic. The direct cost for the first phase was announced at $68 to $84 million. But after 2 years, various estimates have ballooned to $500 to $600 million due to inflation and expanded scope. This amount equals about 8% of Afghanistan's total GDP in 2022. Even with such an incredible construction speed, the Qosh Canal couldn't avoid its first shocks. Early in 2023, the Qosh Canal suffered a major blow. A section of the canal broke, letting 26 billion gallons of water, the amount New York City uses in nearly 3 months, flood straight into the dry sands. The main reason was that the canal hadn't been lined with concrete. Due to tight budgets and deadlines, the builders chose a dig first, line later approach to get water flowing as soon as possible. This is a decision American engineers would find hard to accept in the United States. A federal irrigation project usually takes 10 to 15 years to standardize and line every foot with concrete. Instead of stopping, workers patched the canal right in the flowing water, temporarily reinforced it, and kept digging like firefighters fighting a blaze, while keeping the power on. These early technical issues were just small warnings, because the real threat facing the region is water conflict. The entire Amu Darya Basin is still governed by Protocol 566 from 1987, set by the former Soviet Union, which divides water among 4 downstream countries: Uzbekistan, 48.2%, Turkmenistan, 35.5%, Tajikistan, 15.4%, and Kyrgyzstan, 6%. But there's one country completely left out: Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan has never been allocated a single drop, nor has it signed any international agreements on protecting or sharing cross-border water. But as this massive canal nears completion, of course, the 4 downstream countries, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, are facing a looming disaster. Uzbekistan is the front line and stands to suffer the most from this crisis. Cotton is the backbone of its economy and the livelihood of its people. In 2021 alone, Uzbekistan planted 2.4 million acres of cotton, producing over 1 million tons, making it the world's 6th largest cotton exporter. The cotton industry involves nearly 40% of the population and half the labor force. Just a 15% water shortage could not only reduce output but threaten the entire supply chain, from farmers to spinning mills, garment factories, and exporters. That's exactly the scenario Uzbekistan faces if the Amu Darya's flow weakens. In fact, just one failed cotton harvest can drag the nation's GDP down by 2 to 3% in a single year. Turkmenistan isn't much better off. The country relies heavily on cotton and wheat, which make up about 10% of GDP and provide over 25% of rural jobs. Irrigation water from the Amu Darya sustains hundreds of thousands of acres of wheat, the daily bread for over 6 million people. If water supplies drop as predicted, not only will cotton exports collapse, but domestic wheat prices will spike, threatening food security. For Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, water isn't just for drinking or crops, it's for electricity. About 90% of Tajikistan's power, and most of Kyrgyzstan's, comes from hydropower on the Amu Darya. If the river shrinks, turbines will stop spinning, plunging millions into darkness and crippling industries. If water disputes weren't tense enough, the environmental impact of the Qosh Canal is even scarier, because it's not limited to Central Asia, it could go global. First, look at the Aral Sea, once the world's fourth largest lake, nearly 68,000 square miles. But since the 1960s, the Amu Darya and Sir Darya have been overdrawn to irrigate cotton, and the Aral Sea has nearly vanished, leaving behind the Aralkum Desert now. Over 14,000 square miles of bare seabed. Ships that once floated now sit stranded in the sand. If the Qosh Canal draws even more water, any hope of restoring the Aral Sea could be lost forever. As the seabed dries, desert winds blow over 100 million tons of salty, chemical-laden dust into the air each year. It's not just sand, but a toxic mix of pesticides, fertilizers, and heavy metals built up over decades. People living nearby have cancer and respiratory disease rates many times the global average. Imagine if America's Great Lakes turned into a salt desert and toxic dust spread across Chicago and Detroit. The scary part is this dust doesn't stop at Central Asia's borders. Studies have found traces in Greenland's ice, Norway's forests, and even in the blood of penguins in Antarctica. That means a decision to draw water in Afghanistan today could leave dust particles in a child's lungs in Europe tomorrow. But despite all these risks and regional disputes for Afghanistan, the Qosh Canal is seen as a lifeline. For the first time, the thirsty fields of the north have a chance to revive. Even during construction, the project created about 5,500 direct jobs, helping to curb unemployment, which climbed to 14.39% in 2023. When finished, the canal is expected to irrigate 1.36 million acres of dry land, an area nearly the size of Delaware. This opens opportunities for hundreds of thousands of farmers to return to their land instead of abandoning their villages due to drought. Experts estimate at least 2 million Afghans will directly benefit from drinking water farmland to stable jobs. More importantly, the project could create another 250,000 new jobs, not just in agriculture, but also in water management, food distribution services, and agricultural processing industries, a boost for an economy heavily dependent on international aid. Another turning point is crop conversion. Afghanistan was once famous for its vast opium fields. Just in 2022, the cultivated area reached 500,000 acres. But after the opium ban in April 2022, that number dropped to almost zero. With abundant water from the Qosh Canal, the Taliban government announced a focus on legal grain crops. Currently, about 136,000 acres have been set aside for wheat farms, with the ambition to make Afghanistan a wheat exporter by 2028. However, the future of the Qosh Canal is still a huge gamble. If the project finishes on schedule by the end of 2025, Afghanistan could enter a new era of booming agriculture, food independence, and maybe even become Central Asia's new breadbasket. But this success also means water tension with downstream countries will keep rising. On the other hand, if technical issues like leaks, breaks, or climate change dry up the Amu Darya, then hundreds of millions of dollars already, a huge chunk of the national budget could evaporate along with the fragile hopes of the people. What do you think? Is Afghanistan writing a bold new story or triggering a watertime bomb? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on hot and dramatic stories like this one.